feet are weary from the mountain you have climbed, look ahead, here comes Jesus, right on time. I've struggled through life's deserts. They were so hot and dry, till it seemed all hope was lost and I would die. And I wondered, where was he? Was he still a friend of mine? Then coming down the road was Jesus, right on time. Just hold on, my child, because he's not too far away, and he knows your need before you pray. So when your feet are weary from the mountain you have climbed, look ahead, here comes Jesus, right on time. So when your feet are weary from the mountain you have climbed, look ahead, here comes Jesus, right on time. Look ahead, here comes Jesus, right on time.
His hands hung the stars in space. His hands hold the world in place. His hands scoop the ocean deep. His hands form the mountain steep. His hands meet my needs each day. His hands wipe my tears away. His hands drive my foes away and guide my feet upon life's narrow way. And he holds me in the palm of his hands. And this old world holds nothing for me, since I met the one whose hands were nailed to a tree. He loves me and protects me and provides my every need. Soon I'll see him in that city where we'll live eternally, where my friends and my loved ones are waiting there for me. This old world holds nothing for me. They nailed his hands to a rugged cross for sinful man. Could not pay the cost. They stretched his hands from east to west to take my sin away. Now I'm pure and blessed, and I'm secure in his nail-scarred hands. Safe I'll be till I reach that land that he's prepared for the saved of man. My name's engraved in his loving hand, where he holds me in the palm of his hands. And this old world holds nothing for me, since I met the one whose hands were nailed to a tree. He loves me and protects me and provides my every need. Soon I'll see him in that city where we'll live eternally. this old world holds nothing for me.
A certain man was healed with Jesus. He told the town, look what he did for me. But all the scoffers were quick to question, and they said, how can it be? I was blind, but now I see. He took my burden and set me free. Now my life's been turned around. I was blind, but now I see. Was dark and so troubled, no hope for me could there be found. Then Jesus came and he saved my soul. Now for heaven I'm bound. I was blind, but now I see. He took my burden and set me free. Now my life's been turned around. I was blind, but now I see. If you're groping in the darkness, in the chains of fear and sin, oh, quickly kneel and confess. He'll give you peace and eternal rest. I was blind, but now I see. He took my burden and set me free. Now my life's been turned around. I was blind, but now I see.
I walked by the tomb of Buddha, looked inside and saw his bones, traveled on to see Muhammad, still wrapped up in his grave clothes. Then I journeyed to a garden where old Joseph left him lay, the precious lamb, God's own begotten. He is no longer in the grave. If you knew him like I know him, you would know that he's alive. And if you felt him like I feel him, resurrection deep inside you, now he's living and death has died. If you're wandering in the darkness, come and stay.
Brother David's coming around with the offering plate, and he has caught me broke. That's the first time. I forgot to ask my wife for any money. So, funeral fund today, please. Let me say it's good to see you here this morning on this Easter Sunday. I was thinking this morning, a lot of people go to church today that are, I call them annual church attenders. They go twice a year, maybe once on Easter and once on Christmas. And the Lord said, the Lord said, I've been good to you. He said, your family not like that. He said, your family's in church every Sunday. And I said, they sure are. I said, it ain't nothing I did. I know that. I'm just thankful for the Lord's goodness this morning. Let's take some prayer requests, if you will. Don't forget about Brother Ashmore's service. We'll be here tomorrow, 11:30 to 12:45. They'll receive friends, and then at 1 o'clock there'll be the service here tomorrow. So if you can't come, be sure and pray for that. Yeah, Brother Joel. Okay, all right. Yeah, Brother Ricky. Yes. Oh, yes. All right. Anybody else on the left side? Yes. All right. Yes, sir. Spoken this morning. All right. What about the middle section this morning? Yeah, Brother Finney. Yes, sir. Okay. All right. Yeah, Brother John. Okay. Let's pray. Okay. That's yes, sir. That's great. Yeah, Brother Julian. Okay. What about over here on the right side this morning? Any prayer requests this morning? Yeah, Brother Harvey.
That's not a prayer request. I'm just glad I'm saved. Amen.
Yes.
Best thing that ever happened to me. It ever will. Thank you, Lord.
Yes, sir. All right. If there's nothing else, Brother Huto, how about praying for us this morning, sir, if you will? Amen. John chapter number 19 this morning. John chapter number 19. We got into the chapter last week, and I just want to take just a minute or two this morning and maybe look remind you of some things. A lot of people you read after or may look after, they want to take the Bible and look at the 4 Gospels and other things in the Bible, and they want to find where they don't go together, where they try to make a conflict between each other. Well, you're not going to find that in the Bible. They don't conflict against each other. They complement each other. If you'll take the time to ask the Lord what's going on. So I don't know if I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last week. Between verses 38 and 39 in chapter 18, Pilate sends Jesus to Herod. Now, John does not cover that. And so by the time you get to verse number 19, when you read the other gospel accounts, you're going to find out they released Barabbas. Pilate had Jesus scourged. They crowned him with a crown of thorns, and then they led him off to be crucified. Now, when you get into the Gospel of John, it's different. It does not conflict, but John takes the time when Jesus returns from Herod. In verse number 40 of chapter 18, they choose Barabbas over Christ. Verse number 1 in chapter 19, Pilate has Jesus scourged. Then in verse 2, the soldiers platted a crown of thorns. They put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. The other Gospels end right there, and they lead Jesus off to be crucified. John goes into more detail. Once they put the purple robe upon Jesus Christ, Pilate brings Christ forth again to the mob. He is trying to get Jesus freed. Pilate has got himself between a rock and a hard place, and he does not want to be there. And that's the only reason he sent Jesus to Pilate. Pilate sent Jesus to Herod to start with, hoping Herod would back him up in getting Jesus released. It's not working out for Pilate. Pilate brought him forth. John is the only one that mentions this. Jesus came forth wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe before the mob again. And of course, they cried, "Crucify him, crucify him." We went over that last week. Look at verse number 19. Well, I turned 2 pages. That will not work. Look in chapter 19, verse number 7. We'll pick up here this morning. Pilate has brought Jesus forth again, wanting the Jews. He's trying to pacify the Jews, and he's not able to do that. Pilate again states that he hasn't found no fault in him. Look at verse number 7. The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." Now, the first time when they brought Jesus to Pilate, they wouldn't make an accusation against him. They found him guilty of blasphemy, but they wasn't going to bring that up to Pilate, because their religion is not going to affect the kingdom of Rome. He had nothing to do with that. Now they accuse him because he made himself the Son of God. That verse also means not that he made himself equal with God. That was their rub. I told you that last week. The Jews didn't have a problem with anybody claiming to be a son of God, because they used that term very frequently. They didn't want you making yourself equal with God. Look at verse number 8. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. When Pilate heard that Jesus had made himself the Son of God, he was more afraid. He was afraid. Right now, he was afraid of the Jews. He didn't want no uproar. He did not want a tumult going on. He didn't want a bunch of rebel rousing and fighting going on, because Pilate was responsible for keeping the peace here in Jerusalem. And that's what he wanted. And that's what he governed over. Pilate, they had laws, and they let the Jews govern themselves, but they had to keep order. Pilate had to keep order. Now, Pilate's understanding more about Jesus. He's getting more light. Now he's becoming afraid of, who is this man? Now, you can't tell me that Pilate hadn't heard of Jesus Christ. I mean, he'd been the governor there. Jesus had been ministering 2.5 years at least. Pilate has to have heard of Jesus Christ. These things weren't done in the dark. But now he's found him in a place that he don't want to be. Look at verse number 9. And this is a continuation of verse 8, the sentence. And went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Now, Pilate, I mentioned last week, John is the only gospel that mentions Pilate's struggle. He's going in the judgment hall, out, back and forth. John is trying to show us the quandary that Pilate was in, trying to decide what to do with Jesus. He wanted to do the right thing, but he was struggling with that. But he took Jesus back into the judgment hall, number one, away from the Jewish crowd, so Pilate could actually hear what Jesus had to say without having to put up with the rebel rousers that were going on, that so hated Jesus Christ and wanted to get rid of him. So Pilate took Christ back into the judgment hall, and notice what he asked. He said, Whence art thou? Now, when you look at the English language, the word whence specifically asks, from what source or from what origin are you? Not from what location are you from? Pilate is not asking Jesus Christ, where are you from? Well, he already knew Jesus was from Galilee, because as soon as he found out that Jesus was a Galilean, he sent him to Herod, because that was Herod's jurisdiction. Pilate's not asking Jesus Christ, where are you from? He's asking Jesus Christ, where did you originate? You see why he was afraid? Pilate's wanting to know more about, well, just who is this man I'm dealing with? But notice Jesus' answer. In other words, based on what Pilate had just heard, he was asking Jesus, are you the Son of God? Whence art thou? He wanted to know. Now you got to remember that Pilate, the Gentile, they had a bunch of religions in Rome. They taught that there were sons of God. So it wouldn't be hard for Pilate to understand that Jesus was a son of God. But he wasn't the son of a God. He was the son of the God. There's a big difference. But Pilate wants to know what's going on. Jesus gave him no answer. Do you know why Jesus didn't answer him? In the previous chapter, Jesus had already answered Pilate's question about him being a king. He told Pilate that he was a king, but his kingdom was not of this world. He said, if my kingdom was of this world, my servants would fight. So Jesus had already answered him. Jesus had already convinced Pilate that he was innocent. And Pilate had already determined that. Jesus was not guilty of anything treasonous or anything worth death as far as Rome was concerned. Pilate's going to have to now make a choice without Jesus giving him any more words to strengthen his backbone. Pilate's going to have to come up and strengthen his own backbone. That's why Jesus didn't answer him. He already knew enough truth to let Jesus go. Look at verse number 10. Then said Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? He didn't have as much power as he thought he did. Jesus didn't give him an answer because he didn't expect any justice from Pilate to start with at this point. Pilate had already found him innocent. But at this time, Pilate had already scourged him. Pilate scourged an innocent man. What happened when they scourged Paul and Silas and condemned them without a trial and then found out they were Romans? Well, they were scared of their position because, whatever Rome might have did, they didn't put up with injustice. They wasn't going to put up with that. Pilate's already guilty. Pilate was not used to not getting an answer when he asked a question. That's why he said, Speakest thou not unto me? He's emphasizing me. He's emphasizing his position. Pilate's telling Jesus, look, who I am demands that you answer me. My authority demands that you give me an answer when I question you. Jesus does not understand how important Pilate is. That's what he's saying in this question. The only problem is Jesus does know. But Pilate does not understand just how insignificant he is. He's got the roles reversed. He said, look, Pilate is playing on Jesus' emotions. The Jews have already by this time, the Jews have won and they know it. They're going to fix Pilate in just a little bit, but they've got Pilate exactly where they want him. So Pilate now is trying to use the emotion of fear against Jesus Christ. Well, how are you going to scare somebody? How are you going to scare God? How are you going to make God afraid of you? Well, you're not going to do it. Pilate is taunting Jesus with the fact that your life is in my hands. Well, how can you make a man fear of dying who can't die? How are you going to make him afraid of death, the creator of life? Well, you're not going to make him afraid. But Pilate wants to understand some things. He knows there's something different about Jesus Christ. And he wants to know what's going on. Pilate boasts of the power that he has. He has already found Jesus innocent, yet he don't have the power to set him free. Look what Jesus said in verse number 11. Jesus answered, "Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above." Notice he didn't call him by name, but he said, "Thou." He wanted Pilate. I'm talking to you. You understand what I'm saying? I'm speaking to you. I'm not talking to the Jews. I'm not talking to any of the guards around here. I'm specifically speaking to you. Notice he didn't say that Pilate could not have any power at all, because that's the way God ordained things to work. We're supposed to have people over us. We're supposed to have rules. There's supposed to be people in authority over us. God set that up. Jesus didn't say you can't have any power at all, but he did say you can't have any power at all against me, except it were given to you from above. In other words, Jesus is telling Pilate, you have been given power from above, which is a reference to God, to do what you're doing to me. Well, the only way Jesus could know that the power came from above is if he had been there to start with. That's what he's relaying to Pilate. You don't understand. There's more going on in this thing than you think's going on. Look at what else Jesus said. Thou couldst, verse number 11, thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore, the word therefore simply means for this reason. For this reason that the power is given to you of God. That's the reason you have power at all. It's not what you've done. It's not on account of how you worked or whatever, but he said God gave you the ability to be where you are right now. God worked all that out in your life, even though you don't even know him. Whatever lost men attain to in this life, their abilities, whatever they are. I know it's hard work for some people. I had to work at stuff to get things sometimes. But Jesus and God gave me that ability in my life to do those things. That's what Jesus is telling Pilate. As a natural man, you don't understand this. But the Jews, as God's chosen people, they understood that rulers are raised up by God. What we need to understand is the Jews are taking advantage of civil authority, and they're taking advantage of Pilate as the ruler, and they're using it for their wicked purpose of killing Jesus Christ. They're using God-given authority to their advantage. The Jews are taking advantage of an unlearned man. A man in Pilate. That's what Jesus is telling him. You wouldn't have no power at all except it be from God. Look at the next statement. Therefore, he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. Now, I have always, when I read that, I thought the same thing probably everybody else does. Thought it was Judas. But I got to praying about it and looking at it and studying back on it some more in this past couple of weeks. I don't believe it's Judas. I'm going to tell you why. Judas delivered Jesus over to the Jews. Look back, turn back a page, chapter 18. Chapter 18, look at verse 36. Jesus is answering Pilate here about his kingdom, whether he was a king or not. Chapter 18, verse 36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from thence." All right, look back at chapter number 11. Jesus said, "He that delivered me unto thee." Judas didn't deliver Jesus to Pilate. Judas delivered Jesus Christ to the Jews. The Jews delivered Jesus up to Pilate. So who is he talking about here? I believe he's talking about Caiaphas, the high priest, the ruler of the Jews. He was in charge. "Therefore, he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin." I believe it was Caiaphas. Hath the greater sin. Now, I'm going to give you what I think this is, what I think it means. I don't think I'm off in left field. I might be, but I don't think so. Sin is sin, okay? As far as I know, when you sin against God, you sin against God. There's no murder. God don't have a scale that murder's a number 10 sin and telling a lie is a number 1 sin or a number 2 sin. There's not a scale for sins. I don't think there is. Sin is just sin. God looks at it all the same. So what is he saying here? He that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. Well, look at it like this. Jesus is using the word greater like we would use more or less. Now, there is a degree of sin, more and less. Some people sin more before they get saved than other people do because they wait longer to get saved. Say a man that gets saved at 60 years old, he sinned a whole lot more than somebody that gets saved at 10 years old. So I'm telling you, I don't think Jesus is not talking about as far as a scale of more or greater than, but he's talking about more and less. Do you know why? Let's just say Caiaphas had more sin than Pilate did here. Do you want to know why? Pilate has less sin because he sinned against his own conscience, knowing that Jesus was not guilty, and he scourged him. I think that's the sin, the specific sin that Jesus here is referring to when he's talking to Pilate. But do you know why the high priest had the greater sin or the more sin? Because he had more light than Pilate did. Knowledge gives you light. The high priest, they had a whole lot more light about who Jesus Christ was than Pilate did. Nicodemus made the statement very early in Jesus' ministry, and he said, "We know that thou art a man sent from God, because no man can do these miracles that thou doest except God be with him." Well, who was he talking about when he said we? Well, there's only, number one, Nicodemus was a ruler of the Jews, So he was either talking about the Sanhedrin and those rulers, or he was talking about the Jews in general. I believe he was just talking about the Jews, and for sure the high priest. They knew Jesus was sent from God. Well, that's light. Caiaphas knew Jesus was sent from God. Whether he didn't want to believe he was the Messiah, but he sinned against light when he did that. So Jesus is telling Pilate, there's one that's got greater sin than you have in what's going on here. And it's the high priest. And he's leading this nation astray because of what they're doing. So don't let the wording confuse you. There's no scale as far as measuring a sin. But there is greater sin and less sin. Look at verse number 12. And from thenceforth, Pilate sought to release him. I don't know what Pilate did. I don't know what he said. It's not recorded. But from thenceforth, that means from that moment forward, Pilate wanted to release Jesus Christ. I think he realized Jesus is more than a man. I mean, how could a man know how much I've sinned? How could a man know who sins more than anybody else? A man can't know that. But the Son of God can. Pilate was getting some light. And he was understanding what was going on. He wanted to release Jesus. Not going to happen. Look at verse 12. From thenceforth, Pilate sought to release him. Pilate stated 3 times in the Gospel of John that he found no fault in Jesus. Pilate has done everything he could to get Jesus freed. He sent him to Herod, sent him back. Herod found no fault in Jesus Christ either. If you want to know, you can look in Luke chapter 23. We're not going there, but Luke's gospel is the only gospel that mentions that Pilate sent Jesus to Herod. And when he comes back, Pilate is talking to the Jews, and he states Herod found no fault in him either. So here, in verse number 12, John does not mention what Pilate did to try to set Jesus free. We're not told. But look at the reaction in verse number 12. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. I don't know what Pilate did. We don't know what he said. We're not privy to that. But Pilate did something at the end of verse 11 that let the Jews know, hey, well, he's going to let Jesus go. And they rose up in indignation. They said, we're not going to put up with this. Do you notice they reverted back? It's not blasphemy now. The Jews have reverted back again to the very first thing that they told Pilate Jesus was guilty of, according to the other Gospels. When you read it, they accused Jesus of perverting the people, stirring the people up, making a tumult, trying to uprising against Rome. That's what they started out with. They couldn't get anywhere with that. They've gone full circle now. They have come back around. according to Jewish law, you can't change the charges. Well, they've changed them 4 times already. It just, shows us how much of a sham it was. We know that. But notice what they said. The Jews cried out. John is pointing out that they're becoming more vocal. Now, he doesn't, he doesn't get into much detail about. It's not so much how they said it. They just cried out. John just makes that statement. John is not focusing on verse 12, how he said it. John is focusing on what they said. They said, if you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Now, if you read your history, Tiberius was the ruler's name. But they called him, his name was Tiberius Julius Caesar Augustus. From the first emperor, Julius Caesar, every emperor from now on was referred to as Caesar, just like in Egypt, the leader of Egypt was referred to as Pharaoh. So that's what they are referring to. Caesar, this is the second emperor of Rome. If you read history, you'll find out that Tiberius was paranoid. He was very much afraid of those people under him. And what he was afraid of was that they wanted his position. They were out to get him. And he was paranoid about that. So how's that going to affect Pilate? Well, I'll tell you. How would you like to be accused of not being somebody's friend that's in power and he's paranoid that everybody's under him wants his authority? Well, if you're not his friend, what's that make you? If you're not his friend, you're his enemy. That's what they're telling Pilate. You let him go, you're not Caesar's friend. You're his enemy. Well, that wasn't, do you think that would bother? It bothered Pilate. Why? In that day, when Tiberius was the ruler, if you was accused of being his enemy, that was proof enough you was guilty, and they was going to cut your head off. They didn't have to prove you was in it. They didn't have to have any proof. All somebody had to do was make the accusation that you were his enemy, and they'd cut your head off within a day. They've got Pilate where they want him. Basically, they're telling Pilate, you let him go, and we're going to go to the Caesar, and we're going to cause an uproar, and we're going to tell him that you're his enemy because you let a traitorous person go. You let someone that was guilty of insurrection go and was wanting to cause an uprising. So that makes you guilty of what he is guilty of. And if you're Caesar's enemy, you know what's going to happen to you. They got Pilate right where they want him to. Realizing that victory was near, they moved one step closer, the Jews did, of tightening the grip around Pilate's neck. The Jews are smart. They knew how to work all this stuff. Why? It's politics. It's not so much religion right here as politics. They wanted their way, and they knew how to get it. And they're going to get it too. Look at verse number 13. When Pilate therefore heard that saying. Now John makes mention twice in this chapter of something Pilate heard. Back in verse number 8, he heard Jesus claim to be the Son of God. Well, he was afraid. Verse number 13, when Pilate therefore heard that saying, well, John don't say he was afraid, but I can bet you he was. Look what he did. Verse number 13, when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. Pilate's been going back and forth ever since they brought Jesus here. He's been standing up. He brought Jesus. He's been going in and out. Pilate sits down on the judgment seat. The judgment seat was outside the hall of judgment. It was on the outside. It was a place where he would sit down, where he could see the crowd and they could see him. When he sat down, that was it. Pilate has made his decision, or he wouldn't have sat down. No more questions, no more arguments, no more reasoning. I'm through with this. So he sat down. Notice he mentions two names. John is the only gospel writer that mentions the pavement and Gabbatha. The pavement, it was called because of the beautiful stonework there in the courtyard. That was the Roman name. They called it the pavement. Gabbatha means it's an elevated place, so the judge could be heard. When he sat down, you can bet your money it got quiet. They wanted to hear what he was going to say. Look at verse number 14. I think I got time to get into this. If I don't, I'll just cut it off. Verse number 14. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said, Pilate saith unto the Jews, Behold your king. Don't let the preparation day there in that verse confuse you. I mentioned this before, and I'll just mention it here, but it comes up again. It comes up again in this chapter, and I'll get into more detail then. But because they slew the lamb on the 14th of Nisan, which is our month of April, I think. But anyway, they slew the lamb on the 14th of Nisan, which was it started the previous evening. They've already had the Passover. But the 15th, which would start that evening after 6, would be the 15th. That's the 7 days of unleavened bread. And the Jews simply tied that whole week, and they referred to that as Passover week. And every evening, they would eat a Passover meal, not necessarily a lamb, but they called it the Passover supper. So that's what John is referring to. It was the preparation of the Passover. And I'll get into more detail later on about that. Pilate brought Jesus out and said, Behold your king. Notice he referred to him as the king again. And we'll get into that more next week. I think Pilate he knows he's been taken advantage of. He knows the Jews took advantage of him, and he knows they got their way. And I think he's actually telling the Jews too can play that game. So he simply referred to Jesus. Notice he didn't say, before he's referred to him as the King of the Jews. Art thou the King of the Jews? And he had asked Jesus that. He just cuts the Jews to the bone this time. He says, Behold your king. He knows they hate Jesus. He knows they despise him. The other Gospels tell us he knew they brought Jesus for envy. But he didn't know he was going to be taken advantage of. He thought he had some authority in Rome till he came up against this bunch of Jews. I thank God that Jesus was willing to keep his mouth shut, take up with all the humiliation, put up with it, just because he loved us so much and wanted to die for our sins. Let's pray. Father, we love you. Thank you so much for today where we set this